International news now.
We've got a clip here from PBS NewsHour that provides some images and commentary that gives us some background on this, so let's run it.
Yeah.
A mosque in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula was the scene of mayhem and carnage today. At least 235 people were killed and more than 100 injured as militants attacked a crowded house of worship during Friday prayers in the town of Bir al-Abd. The attackers detonated explosives and shot worshipers as they tried to escape. Egypt's government declared 3 days of mourning across the nation. President Trump condemned the attack and spoke this afternoon with Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Earlier, Sisi declared that the attack will not go unpunished. For more, I spoke a short time ago with New York Times Cairo bureau chief Declan Walsh. Declan Walsh, thank you for joining us. This seems to have been an unusually ruthless attack. They kept on shooting as the ambulances arrived?
Absolutely, that's right. The gunmen arrived in several vehicles. They split up into teams. Some of the gunmen went inside the mosque. They started shooting the worshippers immediately after a bomb had gone off. Other gunmen waited outside and shot people as they tried to flee.
And was unusual in that in the past they've been going typically after Christians. This time it was at a mosque.
That's right. This is extremely unusual. This attack is extremely unusual, both by the size of the attack, the number of people who's been killed. This is the largest attack in modern Egyptian history. And it's also, as you say, by dint of the target. Over the last year, Islamic State have carried out a number of attacks on Coptic Christian churches here in Egypt, but they have never turned their guns on a Muslim mosque. Now, we do not yet have a claim of responsibility for this attack, but it is important to note that Islamic State, the local affiliate of Islamic State, is the most significant, the most powerful group that's operating in that area, and they had previously made threats against Sufi Muslims. So these are Muslims who have a particular practice which extremists find to be heretical, and they had made threats against this group in Sinai in the past. They had killed, about a year ago, a senior Sufi cleric. They beheaded him, and they said that there would be more violence to come, and now they appear to have made good on that threat.
Why isn't there more security in these places?
That is an excellent question. The Egyptian state has been battling the Islamic State in Sinai now for the last 3 or 4 years. It has poured huge resources into the fight in that part of the country. We, as the foreign press and even most of the Egyptian press, have relatively little visibility on what goes on over there because it's a closed area to foreigners and indeed to many Egyptians. But we do know that there are ambushes against the Egyptian military, and that the Egyptian military has responded with some force. So this again is going to raise questions, particularly for President Sisi, as to why his military has been unable to push back the Islamic State, to stop them carrying out attacks like this with such impunity. It's worth recalling that earlier on today, it seems that these groups, these gunmen who possibly numbered in the dozens, were able to carry out this attack with no hindrance. They even waited at the site of the attack while the first responders and the ambulances turned up, and they opened fire on some of those ambulances.
And as you point out, President al-Sisi has said he's going to do something about it. He made a statement today, this will not go unpunished. But as you point out, there have been these other attacks. Do people believe that he will do something about this?
I think there's going to be a particular type of pressure on President Sisi because a mosque has been attacked this time. On the other hand, this is an attack that has taken place in Sinai. Often the rest of Egypt is referred to here as mainland Egypt. That's the main cities like Cairo and Alexandria. That's where the attacks against Christians took place last year. And they certainly did ramp up the pressure on President Sisi, not just from the Christian community, but I think from Egyptians across the board who were worried at the sight of these Islamic State attacks coming into their capital and into other major cities.
Declan Walsh with the New York Times joining us from Cairo. Thank you.
Thank you.
So let me make a few points here. First, there's been no claim of responsibility yet. However, many commentators have noted that an offshoot of ISIS called Wilayat Sinai has been active in the region and is attempting to expand its territorial authority. Some reports say that the attackers were flying the black flag of ISIS during the attack. So it's suspected that ISIS or one of its affiliates was behind the attack. The location of this attack in the Sinai Peninsula is important. According to data from IHS Janes, there have been more deaths from large-scale terrorist attacks in Sinai this year than there have been in any other country except for Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Somalia, all of which have populations much larger than the Sinai. Now, the Sinai has been a center of terrorist activity in part because it is traditionally marginalized from the rest of Egypt. It suffers from lower employment, less education, lower state investment and services. Now, the Egyptian state has used aggressive counterterrorism tactics in this region, and so the combination of marginalization and coercion arguably strengthens support for local militants.
Okay, so let me just make one point about this, the real surprising aspect of this attack that occurred against a mosque and thus fellow Muslims. So previously, Islamic militants have tended to target non-Muslim minorities in this region and in the rest of Europe, in the rest of Egypt, such as Coptic Christians. They've targeted churches before, but they've targeted Christian churches and tended to terrorize non-Muslims who extremists want to drive out of the region. So the attack on a mosque and Muslims is somewhat unprecedented. It's unusual. So what's more, the unusual aspect of this attack was that it happened on Friday during prayer time, and so they seemed to attack in a way that ensured that nearly every attendee there would be killed. And so this was a particularly gruesome attack. Now, one of the main reasons that most commentators highlight for the attack on this mosque is that it's considered a Sufi mosque. Sufism is a mystical form of Islam that emphasizes inward search for God and shuns materialism. The Islamic State and other Islamist extremists target Sufis sometimes because they believe that only a fundamentalist form of Sunni Islam is valid. So Sufis are targeted because they're seen as heretical and thus not fully Muslim in some ways. Now, attacking a mosque also sends a signal of influence. It shows that the Egyptian state does not have control over this region. And one final point that I'll make is that the attack on this mosque really was an attack on not just Sufi Muslims, but also other sects of Islam. Sunni Muslims that had fled to the Sinai because they were displaced by other conflicts in other cities were members of this mosque. And so ISIS and its affiliates who also identify with Sunnis killed not just Sufi Muslims, but Sunni Muslims in this attack as well.